My name is Grace Anderson, and for 15 years, I was the family disappointment. While my sister collected Harvard degrees and six-figure job offers, I taught finger painting to 5-year-olds. Last week at her graduation party, my parents handed her the keys to a Tesla and a $13 million Manhattan penthouse in front of 200 guests. They called her the only success story of the family. I stood in the back, invisible as always, until a stranger in a charcoal suit approached me with an envelope. "Your grandfather knew the truth," he whispered. What happened next left my entire family speechless. Before we begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let me tell you how one piece of paper changed everything. The Anderson family penthouse overlooked Central Park from the 68th floor. Every morning, I'd watch my parents sip coffee from Waterford Crystal while planning Isabella's future from that $50,000 walnut dining table. The Monet original above the fireplace, the real one, not a print, cost more than I'd make in 20 lifetimes as a public school art teacher. My studio apartment in Queens had water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanged like a ghost with anger issues. While Isabella carried Hermes bags that cost more than my annual rent, I hauled art supplies in a canvas tote I'd painted myself during college. The contrast wasn't subtle, and my parents made sure everyone knew it. "Grace teaches at PS 47, my mother would tell her friends at the country club, her voice dropping like she was confessing a family crime. "Isabella just made law review at Harvard." The comparison always came in pairs, like salt and pepper, except one was Himalayan pink salt and the other was just dirt. But here's what they didn't know. I loved my job. Every morning, 23 second graders would run to hug me, their faces lighting up when they saw the art supplies I'd bought with my own money. Their parents, immigrants, single mothers, fathers working 3 jobs, would thank me with tears in their eyes when their children brought home paintings that made them feel seen. My parents never asked about my work. They never knew about the awards lining my desk drawer or the letters from parents saying I'd changed their children's lives. To them, success meant stock portfolios and summer houses in the Hamptons. I still went to every family dinner, every celebration. Not for them. For the grandfather who died 10 years ago. The only one who'd ever said, "Grace, you're going to change the world, just not the way they expect." I had no idea how right he was. Isabella graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law last week. The dean himself shook her hand, and White and Case offered her a starting salary of $215,000 before she'd even thrown her cap in the air. Her Patek Philippe watch, a graduation gift from Dad, cost more than my annual salary of $42,000. She was 28, 4 years younger than me, and already owned a portfolio of investments that would make most CEOs weep with envy. Her LinkedIn profile read like a Wall Street fairy tale: Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law, summer associate at 3 Fortune 500 companies, published in the Yale Law Journal twice. Mine said, "Art teacher at PS 47, believes every child is an artist." The family group chat that week was a shrine to Isabella's glory. Photos of her in her cap and gown, screenshots of congratulations from senators and CEOs, a video of her giving the valedictorian speech. My message, "Congratulations, Bella," got a heart emoji. Nothing more. What that same chat didn't show: the 8 National Education Awards sitting in my desk drawer, the Teacher of the Year recognition. I'd won 3 times. The art therapy program I'd built from nothing that now served 500 children with disabilities across 3 boroughs. I never mentioned these things. What was the point? In my family's currency, they were worthless. The invitation to Isabella's graduation party came on ivory cardstock, so thick it could double as a weapon. Celebrating Isabella's extraordinary achievement, it read in gold foil. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, "Grace, please dress appropriately." I wore my best dress, a simple black sheath from Target. Isabella would be in custom Versace. Some things never change. Or so I thought. Why can't you be more like Isabella? That question followed me through childhood like a shadow with teeth. When I brought home an A- in calculus, Isabella had already skipped ahead 2 grades. When I won the state art competition at 16, Isabella had just been accepted to Harvard at 17. My achievements were footnotes in the grand story of Isabella Anderson, future Supreme Court Justice, as my father liked to predict after his third scotch. My mother perfected the art of selective introduction at social gatherings. "This is Isabella, our Harvard law student," she'd beam, her diamonds catching the light. Then, if pressed, "Oh, and Grace, she teaches." The pause before teaches stretched like a void where disappointment lived. I chose teaching because of Mr. Yamamoto, my high school art teacher who saw me crying in the supply closet after another "Why can't you be" lecture. He said something I never forgot. "Some people build skyscrapers, Grace. Others build souls. Guess which one lasts longer?" I wanted to build souls. My parents wanted me to build portfolios. The family photo wall told the story better than words. Isabella's accomplishments covered an entire section: diplomas, newspaper clippings, photos with governors. My section had one photo: college graduation. Even that was partially hidden behind Isabella's Harvard acceptance letter, which my mother had framed in gold. 10 years of therapy taught me to stop seeking their approval. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your bones are different beasts. So I kept showing up, kept smiling, kept pretending their words didn't carve little pieces from my heart. From the corner of the St. Regis ballroom, a man in a charcoal suit watched me. He'd been there since I arrived, and something about his gaze felt knowing, like he was waiting for something. The St. Regis ballroom glittered with the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. 200 guests sipped Dom Perignon from crystal flutes, while beluga caviar made rounds on silver platters that probably cost more than my car. Every corner screamed money, from the 30-foot ceiling draped in silk to the orchid centerpieces flown in from Thailand that morning. My father clinked his champagne glass with a gold pen. Of course it was gold. And the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to celebrate the only success story that matters in the Anderson family." He raised his glass toward Isabella, who stood in her custom Versace gown, looking like she'd been carved from marble and ambition, my daughter, the Harvard law graduate. The only success story. Singular. I wasn't even a footnote anymore. I was an erasure. My mother worked the room, her voice carrying over the classical quartet. "Isabella's starting at White and Case next month," she told the mayor's wife. Then, catching sight of me by the shrimp display, "Oh, that's Grace. She teaches finger painting to children." The way she said finger painting made it sound like I dealt drugs to toddlers. A woman in Chanel asked what grade I taught. Before I could answer, my mother interjected, "Elementary, very elementary." The woman's smile turned pitying. "How nice that you found something you can do." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text read, "Don't leave early tonight. Your grandfather left you more than memories." I looked up, scanning the room. The man in the charcoal suit raised his champagne glass slightly, a gesture so small only I noticed. My father was back at the microphone. And now, for the real surprise of the evening. "Isabella," my father's voice boomed across the ballroom. "Success deserves rewards." He pulled out a small velvet box from his tuxedo pocket, and the room collectively leaned forward. "The keys to your new Tesla Model S Plaid." The crowd gasped. Someone actually applauded. The key fob glinted under the chandeliers. A $130,000 car for a 28-year-old who already owned a BMW. Isabella floated to the microphone, her smile practiced from years of being the chosen one. "Thank you, Daddy." She held up the keys like a trophy. The photographer my parents hired, yes, they hired a professional photographer for this, captured every angle. "But that's not all," my mother chimed in, joining them on stage. She produced an envelope from her clutch, The Hermes one, naturally, the $30,000 Birkin that could feed a small country. Inside this envelope is the deed to your new home, a $13 million penthouse in Tribeca, 4 bedrooms, private terrace, and a view of the entire city you're about to conquer. $13 million. For reference, that could fund my entire school's art program for the next century. It could provide therapy for thousands of children who'd never otherwise afford it. Instead, it would house one person who already had everything. Isabella hugged them both, and the photographer went wild. The crowd erupted in applause that felt like tiny hammers against my skull. I stood in my corner, invisible as wallpaper, holding my champagne flute so tight I worried it might shatter. "This Tesla is just the beginning of what you deserve, Isabella," my father said into the microphone. His words carried across the room, across the years of comparison, across every moment he'd looked through me like I was transparent. The man in the charcoal suit moved closer. Not obviously, just a drift through the crowd that brought him within earshot. He wasn't watching Isabella's triumph. He was watching me. My phone buzzed again. "The real show starts in 5 minutes. Don't sign anything." Sign anything? What could I possibly— "Grace?" My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. "Come here, please, we need you on stage." Isabella held the microphone like a scepter, her Harvard law ring catching the light. "I want to thank everyone for celebrating this moment with us," she began, her voice honey-sweet with hidden thorns. "Success isn't easy. It takes dedication, ambition, and the courage to reach for more than—" She paused, her eyes finding mine. "Finger paintings and participation trophies." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Harsh." Another said, "But true." "Some people," Isabella continued, "are content with mediocrity. They find comfort in small lives, small dreams, small paychecks. And that's fine. The world needs people to teach children their ABCs, while others of us argue cases before the Supreme Court." My cheeks burned. 200 pairs of eyes tried not to look at me while absolutely looking at me. A woman in pearls stage whispered to her husband, "Is that the teacher's sister? Poor thing." "But tonight isn't about those who settle," Isabella raised her champagne. "It's about excellence. It's about proving that with the right mindset, the right education, and the right priorities, anyone can— Excuse me." The man in the charcoal suit stepped forward. The crowd parted like he carried invisible authority. He was older than I'd first thought, maybe 75, with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of secrets. "I apologize for interrupting," he said, his voice carrying despite its softness. "My name is Harold Whitman. I was your grandfather's attorney for 40 years. My father's face went pale. My mother's champagne glass trembled. "I have something that needs to be addressed tonight," Harold continued, pulling out a leather envelope from his jacket, "before any more announcements are made." Isabella's smile froze. "I don't think— "Oh, but I do think," Harold said. "In fact, your grandfather insisted." My father recovered quickly. He always did when his authority was challenged. "Mr. Whitman, this is a private family celebration. Whatever business you have can wait until— Actually, it can't." Harold's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath, "especially considering what you're about to do." My father's jaw tightened. He knew something. They both did. My parents exchanged a look that lasted a heartbeat too long. "As I was saying," my father turned back to the microphone, speaking faster now, "Isabella will also be inheriting the entirety of the Anderson family estate. The company, the properties, all of it. She's proven herself capable of managing substantial assets." The room erupted in congratulations. Isabella glowed. My mother smiled so wide her Botox almost cracked. "Grace, on the other hand," my father continued, and my stomach dropped, "simply doesn't have the capacity for such responsibility. Teaching finger painting to children is noble, I suppose, but it hardly qualifies someone to manage millions. Some people build empires, others finger paint." The words hit like physical blows. "Which is why," my mother joined in, producing another document from her bag, We need Grace to sign this waiver of inheritance rights. It's what's best for everyone. The crowd went silent. This was too much drama, even for the Upper East Side. Come on up, Grace, my father said. It wasn't a request. I walked to the stage on legs that felt like water. 200 people watched me climb those 3 steps. The woman in Chanel whispered something about family business being so awkward. Someone else muttered about knowing one's place. My mother held out the waiver and a Mont Blanc pen. Just sign it, sweetheart. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harold Whitman stepped onto the stage. I really must insist you stop. You have no authority here, my father snapped. Harold smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Your father would disagree. And since he's the one who actually built this empire you're so eager to redistribute, I'd say his opinion matters. The pen felt heavy in my hand. 200 guests waited. Isabella's smile could have cut glass. The waiver sat on the podium, its legal language blurring through tears I refused to let fall. Sign it, Grace, my mother hissed, her voice low enough that the microphone wouldn't catch it. For once in your life, do the right thing. The right thing. For them, that meant disappearing. Isabella leaned into her own microphone. This is what's best for everyone, Grace. You know you can't handle this kind of responsibility. Remember when you couldn't even manage your college loans without crying? Someone in the crowd actually laughed. My hand moved toward the signature line. Grace Anderson. Harold Whitman's voice rang out clear and sharp. I need you to know something before you sign that document. My father stepped between us. Mr. Whitman, you're trespassing. Security. I'm here as the executor of William Anderson's estate, Harold said, louder now. Your grandfather's real estate, the one your parents have been hiding for 10 years. The ballroom went so quiet, I could hear my mother's pearls clicking against each other as she trembled. That's impossible, my father said, but his voice cracked. My father's will was simple, everything to me. The will you filed was simple, Harold corrected. The actual will, the one I've kept in 3 separate safety deposit boxes with video testimony and multiple witnesses, is anything but simple. He pulled out a thick document from his leather envelope. The gold seal of New York State caught the light. I have something you all need to see, Harold announced to the room. Something that changes everything about tonight's announcements. Isabella grabbed for the waiver. Just sign it now, Grace. Whatever this is doesn't matter. But my hand had stopped moving. Because Harold Whitman was looking at me with my grandfather's eyes. Kind, knowing, and absolutely certain. If you've ever felt undervalued for choosing purpose over profit, please like this video. What happens next will change how you see success. Subscribe to hear more stories about quiet justice and the power of patience. I looked at the pen in my hand, then at the faces around me. Isabella, radiant in her certainty. My parents, impatient and dismissive. The crowd, waiting for the teacher to accept her place at the bottom of the family hierarchy. For a moment, I almost signed it. 15 years of being the disappointment weighed on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was meant for small things, small dreams, small impacts. Maybe teaching children to paint rainbows wasn't worth as much as arguing corporate mergers. Sometimes loving your family means letting go, I said quietly, the microphone catching my words. My mother relaxed. Isabella smirked. My father nodded approvingly. I positioned the pen above the signature line. One signature, and I'd never have to sit through another comparison, another, "Why can't you be more like Isabella" lecture, another family dinner where my work was treated like a hobby. The pen touched paper. Your grandfather wrote you letters, Harold said suddenly. 23 letters over 10 years. Your parents returned every single one unopened. My hand froze. What letters? I looked at my parents. What is he talking about? My mother's face had gone white under her foundation. It doesn't matter now. Oh, but it does. Harold pulled out a stack of envelopes, aged and yellowed. William Anderson spent the last decade of his life documenting something very specific, something about his granddaughters. He held up the document again, the real will. Before you sign anything, Grace, you should know what your grandfather knew. You should know why he called you the one who would change everything. The pen slipped from my fingers, clattering on the podium. Show me, I said. You have no right! My father's voice boomed across the ballroom, his face flushing red. Security! Remove this man immediately! 2 security guards started forward, but Harold raised the document high. I'd think very carefully before you do that. Interfering with the lawful execution of a will is a felony. Everyone in this room is now a witness. The guards stopped. The crowd murmured. Someone was definitely recording this on their phone. My mother tried a different approach, her voice syrupy sweet. Mr. Whitman, surely this can wait until Monday. We're having a family celebration. A celebration where you're coercing your daughter to sign away her inheritance rights? Harold's eyebrows rose. How festive. There's nothing to inherit, my father snapped. I'm the sole beneficiary of my father's estate. The will was read 10 years ago. A will was read, Harold corrected. The one you filed after destroying the original. Or rather, after you thought you destroyed it. The ballroom gasped collectively. Isabella grabbed my father's arm. Daddy, what is he talking about? Your grandfather was many things, Harold continued, addressing the room now. But stupid wasn't one of them. He knew his son well enough to keep multiple copies of his actual will. Notarized. Witnessed. Video recorded. Ironclad. He turned to me. He also knew his granddaughters, both of them, and he made provisions accordingly. My mother was dialing frantically on her phone. Lawrence? Yes, we need you at the St. Regis immediately. Bring the files on. She stopped, noticing everyone watching. Just come. Calling your lawyer? Harold asked mildly. Good. He'll want to see this, especially Article 7. What's Article 7? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Harold smiled, the first warm expression I'd seen from him. The part your grandfather called the Truth Clause. The part that explains why he spent 10 years watching both his granddaughters from afar, documenting everything. My father lunged for the document. Harold stepped back, surprisingly agile for his age. Shall we read it together? Harold asked. Or would you prefer to tell them yourself what you've been hiding? Harold opened the document, its pages crisp despite their age. This will was signed by William Anderson on March 15, 2015, in the presence of 3 witnesses and a notary public. It was subsequently filed with my firm, with copies sent to 2 additional law firms for safekeeping. That's impossible, my father said, but his voice had lost its authority. I handled his estate. You handled what you wanted to handle, Harold interrupted. Your father knew you would, which is why he included very specific instructions about when and how this will should be revealed. He looked at me. He wanted to wait until both granddaughters had shown their true character. Tonight seemed appropriate given the circumstances. Isabella pushed forward. This is ridiculous. Even if there's another will, it can't override. Actually, Miss Anderson, given your Harvard Law education, you should know that a properly executed later will absolutely overrides an earlier one, especially when the earlier one was, let's say, creatively edited. My parents exchanged another look. My mother's hands were shaking. Your grandfather spent 10 years documenting something very specific, Harold continued. The real contributions his granddaughters made to society, not the degrees, not the salaries, the actual impact. He pulled out a folder thick with papers. Grace, did you know your grandfather hired a private investigator to follow your career? Not to spy, to document. Every award you won that your parents ignored. Every child whose life you changed. Every family you helped through your art therapy program. The room was silent. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. He has files on both of you, Harold said, looking between Isabella and me. And based on those files, he made his decision about who should inherit the Anderson legacy. This is insane, Isabella said, but her voice wavered. No, Harold replied. This is justice. Shall we read Article 7 now? Isabella's Harvard training kicked in like a reflex. I want to see authentication. Notary seals, witness signatures, timestamp verification. This could be fabricated. Anyone can create old-looking documents. Spoken like a true lawyer, Harold said approvingly. He pulled out a manila folder, notarized at 3 separate locations. Here's the seal from New York State, authenticated last week when I knew tonight was happening. Here's the witness list. Judge Patricia Hornby, Dr. Michael Chen from Mount Sinai, and Eleanor Roosevelt III from the Manhattan Trust Foundation. Isabella examined the papers, her face growing paler with each page. These are real. Of course they're real, Harold said. Your grandfather didn't leave anything to chance. He also video recorded the signing. He pulled out an iPad. Would you like to see your grandfather explaining his decision in his own words? This is entrapment, my father shouted. You waited until you tried to force Grace to sign away rights you knew she had? Harold asked. Yes, I did wait. Your father predicted you would do exactly this. He said, and I quote, Robert will try to give everything to Isabella the moment he thinks he can get away with it. Wait for that moment, then show them the truth. The crowd was riveted. Someone whispered, better than Netflix. Isabella turned to our parents. You knew? You knew there was another will and you hid it? My mother's silence was answer enough. 10 years, Harold said. They've known for 10 years. They found the first copy in your grandfather's desk and destroyed it. What they didn't know was that he'd already filed copies with 3 law firms and recorded himself signing it. I'll challenge this in court, Isabella said, but her voice lacked conviction. With what grounds? Harold asked. Mental incompetence? Your grandfather's medical records show perfect cognitive function. Undue influence? He hadn't seen Grace in years when he wrote this. Face it, counselor. This will is bulletproof. He turned to page 7. Now shall we discuss the inheritance criteria your grandfather established? Harold adjusted his reading glasses, the document steady in his hands. Article 7. Conditions of inheritance. I, William Anderson, being of sound mind and body, establish that my estate shall pass to the granddaughter who demonstrates genuine service to humanity, measured not by degrees or income, but by verifiable positive impact on others' lives. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Furthermore, Harold continued, this impact must be documented by independent third parties. Not family, not friends, but institutions and individuals with no personal stake in the outcome. Isabella laughed, but it sounded forced. That's completely subjective. How do you measure positive impact? Your grandfather thought of that. Harold pulled out another folder, this one marked with Grace's name. He established specific criteria, letters from beneficiaries, awards from recognized institutions, media coverage of charitable work, professional evaluations from supervisors, all dated and verified. He set the folder on the podium. It was 3 inches thick. Grace Anderson, he read from a summary sheet. 8 National Education Excellence Awards. 3-time Teacher of the Year. Founder of Art Heals, a therapy program serving 500 children with disabilities across 3 boroughs. Published in the Journal of Art Therapy for groundbreaking work with autism spectrum disorders. Recognized by the Department of Education for innovations in inclusive education. My mother gasped. That's not possible. She never told us. Because you never asked, Harold said simply. You were too busy celebrating Isabella's achievements to notice Grace was quietly changing lives. He pulled out another sheet. Letters from 237 families independently verified, crediting Grace with transforming their children's lives. 14 children who were nonverbal before her art therapy program and now communicate through artistic expression. 3 suicide preventions directly attributed to her intervention. Tears were running down my face. I hadn't known he knew. I hadn't known anyone was watching. Your grandfather called you the quiet one who serves, Harold said to me gently. He saw what others missed. Harold opened a second folder, this one bursting with photographs and letters. Your grandfather hired investigators not to spy, but to document what your parents refused to see. Grace, did you know that the mayor's office has your photo on their wall of New York's quiet heroes? I shook my head, speechless. 3 years ago, you used your entire savings to keep your art program running when the school lost funding. You took a second job tutoring to buy supplies. You never told anyone. He pulled out a bank statement. Your grandfather's investigator documented every sacrifice. A woman in the crowd, Mrs. Chen from the PTA, suddenly stood up. That's my son's teacher. She saved his life. He was diagnosed with selective mutism, wouldn't speak for 2 years. Grace taught him to paint his words. Now he won't stop talking. She glared at my parents. You should be ashamed. Others began standing. A man in a navy suit. She taught my daughter after she lost her hearing, said art doesn't need words or sound. Another parent. My son has autism. Grace spent her lunch breaks working with him for free. He just got accepted to art school. My parents looked stunned. Isabella's mouth hung open. Your grandfather followed every news story, Harold continued, pulling out clippings. Local teacher transforms lives through art. Innovative program brings hope to special needs families. The quiet revolution in room 203. He looked at my parents. You had every opportunity to know this. You chose not to look. Then he turned to Isabella. Now, Miss Anderson, would you like me to read your grandfather's assessment of your contributions, or should we skip to his final decision? Isabella's face was stone. Read it. Harold nodded. Very well, but I should warn you, your grandfather was thorough and honest. Harold pulled out Isabella's folder. It was noticeably thinner. Isabella Anderson, Harvard Law, summa cum laude, law review editor, starting salary $215,000. He paused. Community service, mandatory pro bono hours required by law school, 40 hours total over 3 years. No voluntary service beyond requirements. Isabella's face flushed. I was building my career. You were building your resume, Harold corrected. Your grandfather noted the difference. He also documented this. In 2019, you volunteered to organize a charity auction for underprivileged children. You raised $30,000. He paused. You also charged the charity a $15,000 administrative fee. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. That was legitimate compensation for my time, Isabella protested. From a children's charity? Harold's eyebrows rose. Your grandfather found that particularly telling. He pulled out more papers. 2020, you offered pro bono services to a homeless shelter. When you discovered they couldn't provide a tax write-off large enough, you withdrew the offer. 2021. You volunteered to mentor inner-city students. You attended one session, took photos for your LinkedIn, and never returned. My parents were frozen. This wasn't the Isabella they'd promoted. Meanwhile, Harold gestured to my thick folder, Grace has letters from the Department of Education, the National Art Teachers Association, the Autism Society, the Children's Hospital of New York, and… He pulled out an official letter. The White House Office of Public Engagement, commending her for extraordinary service to America's most vulnerable children. He held up both folders. One granddaughter has degrees and dollars, the other has changed hundreds of lives. Your grandfather's will is clear about which one inherits. But there's more, Harold said, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone lean forward. Article 7 has a second component. A clause your grandfather called the humility provision. Isabella's lawyer had arrived, slightly out of breath. Don't say another word, he advised his clients. Oh, I think everyone needs to hear this, Harold smiled. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the strongest. If this story touches you, please comment below. Where are you from and what time are you watching? Subscribe and hit the notification bell to follow the climax that's about to unfold. Isabella's lawyer, Lawrence Fitzgerald, pushed through the crowd, his Armani suit impeccable despite his rush. This is highly irregular. Any will contest should be handled in probate court, not at a social gathering. There's nothing to contest, Harold replied calmly. I'm simply executing William Anderson's explicit instructions. He wanted this revealed publicly, in front of witnesses, specifically when the family tried to exclude Grace from inheritance. Isabella grabbed Lawrence's arm. Tell them this won't hold up. Tell them I'll sue for defamation, for intentional infliction of emotional distress, for what? Harold interrupted. For revealing the truth? Your grandfather documented facts, Miss Anderson. Pro bono hours are public record. Charity finances are public documents. Your LinkedIn posts about mentoring are still online, though the shelter confirms you only attended once. This is character assassination, Isabella's voice cracked. No, a voice from the crowd spoke up. It was Judge Patricia Hornby, one of the will's witnesses. This is accountability. I watched William Anderson sign this will. He was heartbroken about what his son had become, how material success had replaced human values. He said, Wait, Patricia, I built this fortune to help people, not to create monsters. More parents from my school stood up. Mr. Rodriguez, whose son had severe ADHD. Grace Anderson spent every Thursday after school with my boy for 2 years. Never charged us a penny. He's in college now because of her. Mrs. Kim. My daughter was bullied for her disability. Grace created a whole anti-bullying program through art, changed the entire school culture. Dr. Patel. She volunteers at our children's hospital every Saturday, brings art supplies she pays for herself. Isabella looked around wildly. Money doesn't make you worthy, Isabella, I heard myself say, my voice steady. Impact does. You manipulated him, Isabella accused. You must have... Grace hadn't seen her grandfather for 5 years before he died, Harold stated. By your parents' design. They told him she was too busy with her little teaching job to visit. My father's CEO instincts kicked in. When cornered, negotiate. Let's be reasonable here. We can work out an arrangement. Split everything equally. 50-50. That's fair. Fair? Harold's voice carried decades of legal authority. Was it fair when you told your father that Grace dropped out of college? She graduated with honors. Was it fair when you said she was unemployed? She was teaching full-time. Was it fair when you returned every letter he tried to send her? My mother clutched her Hermes bag like a lifeline, tears ruining her perfect makeup. We only wanted what was best for the family. Isabella had so much potential. And Grace didn't? Harold gestured to the crowd. Half this room can testify to Grace's potential. The difference is, she fulfilled hers by lifting others, not by stepping on them. Please, my mother turned to me, desperation cracking her voice. Grace, sweetheart, think about the family reputation. If this gets out... It's already out, someone called. 3 phones were clearly recording. My father tried one last angle. Grace, you don't understand complex finances. The company needs someone with business experience. The company? Harold laughed. You mean the real estate empire built on your father's patents? The ones he invented while teaching at Columbia? Before he knew his son would value square footage over souls? Lawrence whispered urgently to my parents. Isabella stood frozen, her perfect world crumbling in real time. We can challenge mental capacity, Lawrence suggested quietly, but his voice carried. Judge Hornby stood up. I'd be happy to testify about William's mental state, sharp as a tack. He beat me at chess the day before he died. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother sank into a chair. Grace, my father said quietly, what do you want? For 15 years, I'd been silent. The quiet one, the disappointment, the afterthought. Now 200 people waited for my words. What do I want? I repeated, my voice carrying across the ballroom. I wanted parents who saw me, who valued compassion over compensation, who understood that teaching isn't settling, it's building the future one child at a time. I stepped toward the microphone, my target dress suddenly feeling like armor. I spent 15 years believing I was less than Isabella because my bank account was smaller, because my car was older, because my apartment didn't have a doorman. I looked at my parents. You taught me that worth equals wealth. Grandfather knew better. The room was silent except for someone quietly crying, Mrs. Chen, whose son I'd taught to speak through art. I don't need your money, I continued, looking at my parents. I needed parents who celebrated my first teaching award the way you celebrated Isabella's first A+. I needed a family who understood that changing one child's life matters more than billing hours. Isabella finally spoke. So sanctimonious, so noble. You think you're better than me because you're poor? No, I said simply. I think I'm fulfilled because I'm useful. There's a difference between being successful and being significant. Grandfather understood that. Harold cleared his throat. Speaking of your grandfather's understanding, there's one more aspect of Article 7 we need to discuss. The conditions for Isabella. Everyone turned to him. Your grandfather didn't disinherit you, Isabella, Harold said, but your inheritance comes with conditions. Isabella's eyes sparked with hope. What conditions? 2 years of documented public service, real service, not photo ops, not resume building, teaching, volunteering, genuine contribution to society. Only then do you receive your portion. That's extortion. That's education, Harold corrected. Your grandfather's final attempt to teach what your parents failed to, that privilege comes with responsibility. But I have one condition too, I said, and everyone turned back to me. Harold smiled as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Before you state your condition, Grace, there's something else. He flipped to the next page. The humility provision, subsection C. He read aloud. Should any beneficiary attempt to coerce, manipulate, or force another beneficiary to forfeit their inheritance, the coercing party forfeits all claims immediately and permanently. My parents went white. Isabella grabbed the podium for support. Furthermore, Harold continued, if such coercion occurs in public, witnessed by multiple parties, the forfeited inheritance transfers entirely to the wronged party, activating the emergency trust fund of $15 million, separate from the estate. Lawrence frantically flipped through his phone, presumably checking legal databases. That's ironclad. Tonight, Harold gestured to the room. Robert and Margaret Anderson, along with Isabella Anderson, attempted to force Grace to sign away her inheritance rights in front of 200 witnesses. The conditions of subsection C are met. $15 million? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Your grandfather was very specific, Harold explained. He said, if they gang up on Grace, and they will, she should have immediate resources to establish her independence. The fund transfers automatically upon documented coercion. He pulled out a tablet. The transfer was initiated the moment Grace was called to stage to sign that waiver. Your grandfather's financial advisor has been watching via livestream. Yes, Mr. Anderson, the charity photographer you hired was actually documenting this for the estate. My father sank into a chair. He planned all of this? He knew you, Harold said simply. He knew that you'd wait until a public moment to maximize Grace's humiliation, to pressure her into compliance. He knew Isabella would support it for her own gain, and he knew Grace would endure it quietly, as she always has. The company? My mother asked weakly. Transfers to a trust with Grace as primary beneficiary and decision-maker. Though, Harold looked at me, your grandfather hoped you'd convert it to a foundation. He left suggestions for focusing on art therapy and special education. Isabella was crying now. Not pretty tears, but the ugly kind that come with genuine loss. My job offer? White and Case has a morality clause, Lawrence said quietly. Being party to inheritance fraud, they'll withdraw the offer. The Tesla keys fell from Isabella's hand, clattering on the marble floor. Lawrence Fitzgerald, despite being my family's lawyer, had gone pale as he scrolled through his tablet. The legal ramifications are severe. The attempted coercion tonight, witnessed and documented, constitutes inheritance fraud. The Bar Association will investigate. Isabella, your law license application. No, Isabella gasped. No, they can't. They can and they will, Judge Hornby interjected. Attempting to defraud a family member of inheritance through public coercion, the Character and Fitness Committee will have a field day. Harold produced more documents. The estate accounts were frozen 40 minutes ago, the moment the coercion began. Court orders, signed by Judge Martinez, who's been monitoring the situation remotely. He held up papers with red seals. Robert Anderson, your access to the company accounts is suspended pending investigation. The brownstone, the Hampton House, the portfolio, all frozen. You can't do this, my father roared. I'm not doing anything, Harold replied. I'm executing William Anderson's explicit instructions. He wrote, if Robert tries to steal from Grace, and he will, stop him immediately and publicly. My mother's phone rang. She answered with shaking hands. Hello? What do you mean frozen? All of them? She looked at my father. The credit cards aren't working. The penthouse? Isabella asked desperately. The one you just gave me? Was never theirs to give, Harold said. It's part of the estate, which now belongs to Grace. Someone in the crowd whistled low. $13 million, plus the company valued at $30 million, Harold added, plus the liquid assets of approximately $15 million, plus the art collection, your grandfather was quite the collector, valued at $6 million. $64 million? Isabella's legs gave out. Someone pushed a chair under her. That Grace's parents tried to steal from her, Judge Hornby said loudly, ensuring the recording phones caught every word. This is why William Anderson wanted witnesses. The crowd was buzzing. This would be all over the Upper East Side by morning, all over the internet by midnight. The Tesla? Isabella asked in a small voice. Purchased yesterday with estate funds, Harold confirmed. It'll be returned to the dealer Monday. Every symbol of success my parents had flaunted was built on theft, on stealing from the daughter they deemed unworthy. Isabella Anderson, Harvard Law summa cum laude, the golden child who'd never failed at anything, crumbled completely. Her perfect makeup ran in streams down her face as she sobbed, not the delicate tears of earlier, but raw, broken sounds. I don't understand, she gasped between sobs. I did everything right. Perfect grades, perfect school, perfect job. Perfect is not the same as good, Harold said gently. Your grandfather wrote about you. Isabella has every advantage but empathy, every skill but kindness. Maybe losing everything will teach her what gaining everything never could. Isabella looked at me through her tears. For the first time in our lives, she looked at me, not through me, not past me, but at me. You knew, she whispered. You knew you were worth more, and you never said anything. I didn't know about the will, I said honestly, but I knew my worth wasn't measured in dollars. You taught me that, actually. Watching you chase money while missing meaning. You taught me what not to value. I've never... Isabella's voice broke. I've never actually helped anyone, have I? Not really. Not without expecting something back. The room was silent. Even the waiters had stopped pretending to work. I don't even know how, Isabella admitted. To help, to serve, to care about someone else's success more than my own. She looked at our parents. You made me this way. You praised every achievement that brought status and ignored every opportunity to build character. And now I'm 28 years old, and I don't know who I am without my resume. That's the first honest thing you've said in years, my mother said quietly, surprising everyone. Isabella stood shakily. Grace, I need that job. Not white in case, whatever you'll let me do. I need to learn. My father stood before the crowd, this titan of real estate who'd built his identity on being William Anderson's son, and for the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. Not the CEO, not the patriarch, just a man who'd lost his way. I measured everything wrong, he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Stock prices, square footage, net worth. I measured everything except what mattered. He turned to me. Grace, you were never the disappointment. I was. I disappointed my father by becoming everything he never wanted. A man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. My mother stood beside him, her perfect posture finally breaking. We were so proud of Isabella's Harvard acceptance that we framed the letter. But Grace, you have 237 letters from families whose lives you've changed, and we never framed a single one. She looked at the crowd, many of whom were their society friends. We taught our daughters that appearance matters more than substance, that wealth matters more than worth. We were wrong. Someone started clapping, Mrs. Chen. Then another parent joined, then another. Not for my parents' confession, but for the truth finally being spoken. The irony, my father said, laughing bitterly, is that my father built this fortune as a teacher. A Columbia professor who invented 3 patents that changed the industry. He never cared about the money. He cared about the knowledge. And I forgot that. He looked at Harold. He tried to tell me, didn't he? All those years, he tried to redirect me toward meaning instead of money. Every week, Harold confirmed. He'd say, Robert, you're building a monument to nothing. Grace is building lives. We measured success in dollars, my mother said, looking at me, when we should have measured it in lives changed. The photographer, who apparently worked for the estate, captured everything. The truth finally exposed, documented for posterity. My father straightened his shoulders. Grace, we don't deserve forgiveness, but we're asking for it anyway. I stood at the podium, looking at my family, broken, exposed, finally honest, and made my decision. I accept the inheritance, I said clearly. All of it, as grandfather intended. Isabella's sob cut through the air. But, I continued, I also accept his vision for it. The company will become the Anderson Foundation for Art Therapy and Special Education. The buildings will house programs, not profits. The money will fund teachers, not takeovers. I turned to Isabella. You want to learn to serve? You'll start Monday. Minimum wage, working with our most challenging kids. The ones who bite, who scream, who throw paint. You'll clean up their messes and celebrate their breakthroughs. You'll learn that progress isn't measured in percentages, but in smiles. Yes, Isabella said immediately. Yes, anything. 2 years, I said. Not because the will requires it, but because that's how long it takes to understand that teaching isn't about you. It's about them. If you last 2 years, really last, not just show up, then you'll receive your inheritance as grandfather outlined. I faced my parents. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward. You'll have access to a living trust, enough to maintain a reasonable life, not the excess you're used to. The brownstone stays in the family, but the Hampton House becomes a summer camp for special needs children. My mother gasped. The Hampton House? Grandfather specifically mentioned it. He said it should ring with children's laughter, not cocktail chatter. Harold smiled. Your grandfather predicted this too. He said grace would be graceful even in victory. This isn't victory, I corrected. It's justice. And justice includes rehabilitation. I looked at the crowd, society's elite who'd watched my humiliation for years. The Anderson Foundation will be hiring real positions for real service, not galas and charity balls, but hands-on work with children who need us. Anyone interested can submit applications through Mr. Whitman. Several hands went up immediately. Grace, Isabella said quietly. What about your condition? You said you had one? I smiled. My condition is simple. Family therapy. All of us. Weekly. For a year. We're going to learn to be a family that measures worth correctly. My parents nodded immediately. Isabella agreed. Your grandfather would be proud, Harold said softly. He knew this would happen, I realized. All of it. Every detail, Harold confirmed. He said, Grace will teach them what I couldn't, that love isn't measured in dollars, and family isn't about inheritance. It's about inheriting values worth passing on. 6 months later, The Anderson Foundation for Art Therapy and Special Education served 2,000 children across 5 states. The Hampton House hosted its first summer camp with 40 kids who'd never seen the ocean. The Brownstones Ballroom, where my parents once held society gatherings, now echoed with children's laughter during weekend art workshops. Isabella lasted the first month by sheer will. The second month broke her. A 7-year-old with autism had a meltdown, threw paint everywhere, including in Isabella's hair. She cried in the supply closet. I found her there, covered in purple paint, and she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. He was trying to paint the sound of happiness, she said. He told me purple sounds happy. Now she runs our sensory art program. She's brilliant at it, that Harvard brain finally serving something meaningful. Her salary is $43,000 a year. She drives a Honda Civic. She's never been happier. My parents volunteer every Wednesday. Dad reads to kids while Mom helps with art projects. Last week, a child hugged my mother and left paint handprints on her blouse. She wore those handprints the rest of the day like medals of honor. The foundation has 50 full-time teachers, all paid $60,000 minimum, a living wage for doing life-changing work. We've partnered with 15 hospitals, 30 schools, and countless families who never thought their children would communicate until art gave them a language. White and Case called last month. They wanted Isabella back, said they'd reconsidered. She laughed and hung up. I have purple happiness to paint, she told them. Harold Whitman serves on our board. He says grandfather would be amazed at what we've built. I disagree. I think grandfather knew exactly what would grow from the seeds he planted. I still teach at PS 47. Same classroom, same kids who need me, same $42,000 salary from the school. The only difference is that now I can buy all the supplies we need. Every child gets their own easel, their own paints, their own chance to show the world their inner light. My grandfather knew that true inheritance isn't money, it's impact. He spent 10 years watching from afar, documenting not our achievements but our choices. He saw Isabella choose status over service. He saw my parents choose appearance over authenticity. And he saw me choose purpose over profit. The will wasn't about punishment or reward, it was about alignment, putting resources in the hands of someone who'd use them for others, not themselves. Grandfather didn't leave me millions. He left me the means to multiply compassion. Last week, Isabella and I went through grandfather's letters, the ones my parents had returned. In one, he wrote, Grace, you're painting the world better, one child at a time. Someday, I'll make sure you have all the colors you need. He kept his promise. My parents are different now, smaller in the best way, less proud, more present. They've discovered that being grandparents to 2,000 kids through the foundation brings more joy than any boardroom victory ever did. The art collection grandfather left? It hangs in children's hospitals now. Picassos and Pollocks watching over kids who paint their own masterpieces between treatments. That stranger in the charcoal suit who changed everything? Harold still comes to our events. He always stands in the back, watching, smiling. Last week he told me, Your grandfather said you'd know what to do with the money. He said, Grace already knows the difference between having wealth and being wealthy. He was right. I am wealthy. Not because I inherited $64 million, but because I inherited the understanding of what to do with it. Money is just paper and numbers until you transform it into changed lives. That's the real inheritance my grandfather left. Not a fortune, but a purpose for it. If this story reminded you that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories about quiet justice and the power of patience. Comment below. Have you ever been undervalued by those who should have seen your worth? Remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the strongest. Thank you for listening to Grace's story.